like to call the PZA meeting. Can I get please get for Wednesday, August 17th at call to order. We get a roll call, please, Kelly.
Mr. Featherling?
Here.
Mr. Miller? Present. Mr. Tholen? Ms. Peters? Present. Mr. Fairfield? Present. Mr. Snipes? Mr. Swanson? Present. Mr. Dunnell? Mr. Eckhoff? Mr. Kirkstra? Present. Ms. Hudson? Present. Mr. Alexander Hildebrand? Mr. Gowler? Ms. Foster? Present. Mr. Wheeler? Present. Mr. Seroy? We have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay, first up, we have the minutes. Get approval of the minutes. Get a motion in a second. Mr. Swanson and Mr. Kirkstra in the back. First and second, all in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. Move on to, next up is the building report, which we don't have that for this meeting. It's going to go to the county board.
Executive, probably.
Executive, okay. Okay. Okay, we're going to go to bid opening for demolition of properties on Laurel Road.
Right. We issued a request for bids for the demolition of the two homes that we bought as part of the floodplain buyout, 218 and 223 Laurel Lane. We have received 2 bids. The deadline was 4 o'clock yesterday, so we'll go ahead and start opening them. A&R Tree Service and Demolition Services.
Yeah, sorry. We need a motion to open the bids.
Sorry.
Okay, Mr. Kirkstra, Mr. Fairfield, all in favor say aye. 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 Okay, go ahead, Del. Sorry.
Here it says the project bid price is $21,800. A&R.
A&R. Is that for both, Del?
That's why I looked through more of it.
Yeah. They're side by side, so it could be that much.
To it. Yeah. Bid submittal for 218 and 223. Project bid $21,800.
Okay, that's good, huh?
There's that one. And the other one does not have their name on the envelope.
Taped it shut.
Yes. This is Patrick N. Ryan is the company name on this one, and bid amount $29,423. Okay. Yeah, I believe it would be appropriate to have a motion to accept the lowest bid, providing that the actual bid meets all requirements of the.
But we just have one for each house, or the same guy bid?
These are for both houses.
Same company?
Yes, we bid the project as both houses on the project, so that's.
Okay. Ms. Peters? Oh, Andy. Mr. Wheeler?
It has to be lowest responsible bidders and language.
Yeah, lowest responsible bidder.
As for a motion for the lowest responsible bidder and that Dell feels approved for?
Yeah, we will go back and make sure that these bids meet the requirements of the.
Okay, we got it first by Ms. Hudson, second by Mr. Swanson. We get a roll call on that. We are technically spending money. Andy, we spending money?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Peters? Mr. Fairfield? Aye. Mr. Swanson?
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstra?
Aye.
Ms. Hudson? Aye. Ms. Foster? Aye. Mr. Wheeler? Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Okay, will that apply to both? We got to do them both, Dell.
You accepted the lowest bid, which would be at this time A&R Construction.
Okay. Okay, so what do we have for a total altogether? 50 something?
21,800.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Okay, we're all set, right?
Yes.
Okay. Next time, we're gonna move on to zoning. We got the ZBA case 22-8, request for a special use permit in section 121-99, 34 solar farm in the A1 agricultural district on a parcel generally situated in section 26 of Manteno Township. The petitioners are JBRJ LLC, property owner, and Turning Point Energy TPE ILKA 32 LLC, applicant.
Okay. This is
Ms. Peters.
I'd like to disclose that I have a financial interest in this property and will be abstaining from the vote.
Okay, thank you.
All right. This is a request for a community solar garden, 5 megawatts on a approximately 40-acre tract. Kelly, if you could load up the PowerPoint for KA32 Kimley Horn.
K32, that's the one in Diversitech, right?
That would be the one in Diversitech. We're going to allow the applicant to present the same PowerPoint that they presented at Zoning Board of Appeals, which will show the site plan and the key points of the project.
And that, should we do questions as we go, or do them all at the end?
We'll wait at the end.
Okay. Well, if you have any questions, we're going to do them at the end of each presentation. Okay. Hopefully you do. See. Okay.
Test. Okay.
Test.
Good morning. I'll introduce myself. I'm Jason Cooper. I'm a civil engineer with Kimley Horn Associates. I'm here on behalf of the Turning Point Energy team, who are here in the audience. So if you have any questions for the developer, we can certainly direct those to them. But I'll run through the presentation that we did here on Monday. I do tend to speak pretty quickly, so if I start going a little fast, I can slow down, just yell.
You can move the mic over so it's more comfortable for you. It's not.
You want to put me in the corner here?
Yeah, there you go. Kind of look like you're standing up against the wall.
It's because I was.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the site plan for the first project, KA32. This is at the southwest corner of Redwood Street and Pine Road in Manteno, Illinois. It's a little hard to see there on the screen, but I'll just run through some of the highlights. It's a 5 megawatt AC solar farm. This is going to be a ground-mounted single-axis tracker. So I actually grew up in Kankakee County, and I know there's a couple of these around the area. So some of you may have seen some of these projects that are built around here. This will be very similar equipment to those that have been installed in the county. On the site, you can see there's a perimeter fence and access road. Very difficult to see, but the access road's on the very northeast corner. This was done strategically to put the access and the equipment near the industrial area. The northeast side of the site, and this area in general is industrial, just south of Manteno. We do have a proposed landscape buffer, which I'll highlight and talk a little bit more about on a couple of slides on the west side. That was done as well, just to provide some additional visual aesthetics to the project. We're aware that not everybody has a different opinion on the way solar farms look and how they blend into the natural environment. Some people believe they fit very well, others do not. And so just to be cognizant of that fact, we've went ahead and proposed a landscape buffer here on the west side of the project. This is the preliminary transportation and access plan. Again, a little difficult to see, but we've taken a screen clip of the Illinois Department of Transportation's route designations on the right there. We're going to be coming off of Route 57 and then using a combination of township, municipality, and state roads to access the site, both during construction and then once in operation. So this is the slide I alluded to a little bit more about the landscape buffers, and on Monday we actually introduced a prototypical landscape plan for KA04, which is the next project I'll talk about, but that was entered into the record on Monday, which gives a little bit more detail. Turning Point Energy's goal for all of their projects in Illinois is going to be to meet the Illinois Department of Natural Resources Solar Pollinator Scorecard. That's not a requirement in the state, so they're willingly going forward with that, and there's some requirements in order to become classified as a solar pollinator friendly site that need to be implemented. So we will be using solar pollinator seed mixes across the site, as well as some additional requirements that are needed to meet the Department of Natural Resources requirements for a pollinator friendly site. And then you can just see a couple of potential landscape renderings here for what that buffer may look like along the west side of the site. Stormwater ground cover. So this is my area of expertise as a civil engineer. I always think it's important to acknowledge what we're going to be doing from a stormwater and ground cover standpoint, since these are agricultural fields in the existing condition. So the American Society of Civil Engineers issued an abstract about 10 years ago studying the hydrologic response of solar farms. Essentially what this did is it modeled rainfall on ground cover, different spacings of solar modules, different rotations, and essentially what it came to determine is that the solar modules elevated above grassy field conditions have little to no impact on the volume of stormwater runoff. So if you can go to the next slide, I've got just a quick graphic here. In addition to that study, we're actually going to be increasing the infiltration, decreasing the runoff by establishing that pollinator seed mix that I spoke of before, that's going to have a more deep-rooted year-round root structure out there as opposed to your traditional row crop. This is going to allow for stormwater to infiltrate into the ground more, be absorbed more by the soils, and then protect that soil from runoff, which would occur had that not been stabilized. And this is just a potential picture of what those pollinators could look like when in bloom. I do think it's important to note that there's a misnomer that grass won't grow under the panels because it's absorbing the sunlight, but that's not the case. The sunlight still gets under there, and the grass can grow just fine under those panels. This is a drain tile slide. I don't believe that Tom Huddleston's going to be speaking today, but he went through a pretty comprehensive explanation of drain tile and walked through that and our approach to that. So if there's any direct questions on drain tile, I think we can direct those to Tom, who's here in attendance today. But we do have a plan in place to mitigate any drain tile and protect those for the project. The decommissioning plan, this is just a high-level overview of a decommissioning plan, and will be required by the Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement to put together a decommissioning plan and financial assurance for the project prior to starting construction. Essentially what the decommissioning plan does is it puts forth a process for the project to be taken out of production and returned back to either agricultural production or the land that it was before the solar farm. So there's requirements in the AMA that need to be met, and our decommissioning plan will be in accordance with that. The typical parts of a decommissioning plan are listing the project components. So for solar farms, that's fairly limited. There's the equipment that hosts the inverter and transformer. There's the solar modules and the racking, and those are input on piles and input into the ground, access roads and perimeter fence. And so it's very limited amount of infrastructure that goes in on these. The decommissioning plan will address the removal of all of that equipment, and prior to us getting a building permit from the county, we'll be responsible for putting together a cost estimate for that decommissioning and putting financial surety in place with the county in accordance with the code. As part of our diligence for these projects with Turning Point Energy, our team completed an environmental constraint study. It's part of our diligence in looking at the land to make sure that we are being cognizant of all the state listed and federal requirements for environmental concerns. So you can see on the list here quite a few items that we checked, including FEMA floodplains, wetlands, county soils, state and federal listed species, among other things. Two parts I did want to note is that we have started our consultation with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. We submitted through their EcoCat, and I'll go through a little bit more on a couple of slides after this. And then we also started our formal consultation with the State Historic Preservation Office, which we've got our correspondence letters from them as well. Wetlands and Waterways, we completed a level 1 desktop wetland, and what that does is it researches historic aerials, soil types, topography, and looks to identify if there's any potential for wetlands. Our environmental team did not identify any wetlands on site, thus we don't expect any impacts to wetlands as part of the project. We checked the IPAC for federally protected species. It did list a few species that you can see listed on the screen there. However, due to the highly disturbed nature of the agricultural field that's out there, the lack of woods and potential habitat, we don't expect any impacts to federally listed species, and we'll make sure that the project, when final engineering is in place, does not have any impacts. State listed species, as I mentioned before, Illinois DNR has a tool, the Ecological Compliance Assessment Tool, formerly or typically referred to as the EcoCat. That's a database that you submit to the state, and a DNR representative will review your site to see if there's any state listed species in the area. We submitted that, the DNR reviewed and did not identify any state listed endangered species near our project, and they issued a consultation termination, which essentially means there's no more further correspondence with DNR needed for the project. Cultural resources, as I mentioned, we submitted to the State Historic Preservation Office to identify if there were any cultural resources in the area. The SHPO did provide us a letter stating that there could be a probability of historic resources. I can say on my experience on over 50 solar projects in Illinois that the SHPO submits this letter on every single project. It's part of their process. We will be required to do a phase 1 archaeological survey before we get our state stormwater permit, and we'll have to have sign off from the SHPO. We intend to do that before we start construction unless we have correspondence with the SHPO that doesn't deem that necessary, but that is standard process for these solar farms. The Natural Resource Inventory Report, in accordance with the county code, we submitted to the Soil Water Conservation District for an NRI. We got that report back in mid-June. The LISA score for that came back at a 162 out of 300, putting it in a low rating for protection. We believe that taking this land out of row crop production for the life of the solar farm is actually going to benefit the soil, and that this is a complementary use to the ag industry there, and protecting that soil, rejuvenating it, and eventually turning it back over to the landowner to continue to farming should they want to do so. And that concludes our presentation here today. I don't believe we're going to have time to go through this portion. So thank you.
Thank you. Zoning Board of Appeals heard this case Monday night and recommends its approval 6-0. There were no objectors.
Okay, thanks, Del. Okay, I have one quick question about weed control.
Just a summary of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can't speak on behalf of the developer, but I know there will be an operations and maintenance plan in place that covers that. As part of our building permit, we'll have to include that and submit that too before we get that.
Anyone else have any questions? Mr. Wheeler? Oh.
I have a few, but should we get a motion first?
Oh, get a motion in a second? Okay, Ms. Hudson. Okay, look at Larry back there too. Second?
Just a couple of things.
Discussion here.
Yeah, our ordinance, Del, this is more questions for you because
Sure.
the ZBA recommended stipulations.
Yes,
and ground cover shall be planted with native pollinator-friendly species. That's part of our ordinance anyway, correct?
It is, but we reiterated.
You
in the
reiterated,
conditions.
okay. All required landscaping shall be subject to the maintenance requirements. Again, part of the ordinance.
And we
This
just
goes to your question, I think,
reiterated.
Mr. Featherling. And then the 8-foot-tall ag-style fence shall be permitted in lieu of the required chain link fence. Was that something you guys introduced, or is
Yes.
Where did that? Can you explain why that's in there?
Our ordinance requires an 8-foot chain link fence around all solar farms. Early on, however, it seems to be very popular to use an agricultural style fence for these. It's kind of like your woven wire fence, a square 4-inch. I think everyone has seen those type of fences. It's more palatable to neighbors. It blends in with the rural environment better. So rather than go through a whole variance process, we've been allowing that as a condition upon the approval that they would be allowed to use a agricultural fence instead of a chain link
So
fence.
our motion should include those.
Include the
three things.
conditions
Yeah,
as specified.
Already put on there by ZBA.
Yes.
And then a couple other ones. The noxious weed control. We've never really addressed that here. Most counties in Illinois don't. Is that part of our ordinance as well, that the noxious weeds have to be eliminated on the property? Or
No, we have not reiterated that because it's state law.
it's state law? Okay,
Okay.
good. Now, again, not many people in the state are doing it, but, you know, because it's really an unfunded mandate.
Yeah,
But
a non-enforced law is still a law.
I know, I gotcha. It is because you'd have, technically, I don't know if you know this, there should be somebody walking the rural areas of the county looking for noxious weeds and forcing landowners to kill the weeds on their property.
Yeah.
That's That's what the state law basically says. So.
In these two instances, the a review of their application actually does mention noxious weed control.
Okay, all right.
That'll be more solidified at building permit time, but yes.
And the last thing I had was LISA scores. It's always bothered me, LISA scores, when you're talking about solar farms, and because they don't necessarily apply. And we've talked about this. Could you explain a little bit why they're relevant in a lot of contexts, but as far as solar farms,
I certainly can. I have those same concerns about putting a lot of weight towards a LISA score when it comes to the solar farms. The LISA score was designed to evaluate a particular site for its permanent development, and generally speaking, residential development, which is going to have an impact on that site and its surroundings. There's two parts of the LISA score. LISA is land evaluation and site assessment. The land evaluation part of it is where it looks at the soils for productivity, drainage, and those sort of things, and that is pretty fairly straightforward. That part of the score, hard to argue about that. The site assessment side of it, however, looks at criteria such as distance from a municipality, distance to sewer and water, having the appropriate transportation network in place to support the development. All of these things, or many of these things, don't apply to a solar farm, such as at least one of these got an additional 10 points for being too far away from sewer and another 10 points for being too far away from water, neither of which a solar farm needs or wants and has any use for. So you could lower that score by 20 points if you didn't consider it. Unfortunately, the LISA score doesn't work that way, and it's pretty black and white. It either is or it isn't. There is no gray area there. So my opinion on that is the board should look at the LISA score, but they should also take into consideration that not everything there applies and should weight it accordingly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andy.
And it is, you know, the just to add to that, the LISA score was adopted by the county board, I think, in about 1997. So it is possible that the county board could create a LISA system just for solar farms if they chose to do so.
Interesting.
Because for solar farms, things like a proximity to a substation is far more important than proximity to sewer and water.
Yeah, and that wouldn't be involved in a LISA score either, so.
Thank you.
Okay. Janice, I saw you raise your hand, but technically, I guess, I don't think you can comment on this if you recused yourself.
I just have a general question that would apply to any solar farm going right now. That
Okay. Yeah, well,
our last round of solar farms were put into a lottery and they got chosen by the state. Is that the case now, or are all of them going to be accepted if they go through all the process?
I am not sure on the entire state process. I do know that the next part of the process is November 1st, and that the solar farms must have local approval to get into that process for November 1st, which is why we're seeing applications now. Exactly how they're going to run that lottery or issue those tax credits, I do not know.
Thank you.
still for grabs, yes. Okay, anyone else? Mr. Kirkstar.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. It's very well, especially when it comes to the environmental impact that this may have or may not have on our land. Absolutely. And also, I'd like to reiterate the part that the landscaping that you were referring to. Actually, it's my understanding that along with this control that you're putting in there, when the land does come back over to the public, it actually is going to be in better condition than what it was because of the landscaping, and it probably be even more fertile land. But the other question that I have is, how will this interface with our infrastructure that we have now and into our grid system? Will it be applicable for what we have now and also be able to be upgraded if there are any upgrades in our system?
So I'm a civil engineer by degree and trade, so it's a little outside of my wheelhouse here, but I'll do my best to kind of answer your question. So my understanding is these community scale size, or what we call distributed generation facilities, they connect into the lines you see running down the roadway, right? Those, if you see 3 lines on top of a power pole, we call that a 3-phase line. So that's the distributed grid that's ran by your utility provider. So in our case, ComEd. These smaller projects submit to ComEd. ComEd does an assessment of a feasibility study of their system and says, you know, yes, the system's ready for you to connect in here, and there's no upgrades other than, you know, a point of interconnection that's called, that has a few maybe transformers on the poles or interconnect process that allows it to go straight into the grid. So as part of the process to develop these, the developer and owner needs to get that approval from ComEd, and in some instances the line is over capacity, and there would need to be major upgrades to the system, at which point a lot of times the projects don't make sense then financially, so they don't go forward. So these projects are far enough along in that process to know that there's not any major improvements and there's additional capacity in those lines to accept the electricity that we're generating. Does that answer the question?
Yes, that does.
Okay.
Okay, anyone else? No? No? Okay,
Do you need to amend the motion to include the conditions?
yeah, we had was there 3 of them now?
3 conditions.
3 conditions? Okay. I get you to read the conditions into the, we already had a motion in a second now, so we had to ask the first and second guy. I don't remember who it was. I think it was the first. Okay. We have a couple stipulations here on the, from the ZBA put on the case that we need to have included in the motion, okay?
Yes.
So the first and second, we may have to be changed.
Would you like me to read them?
Sure.
Condition number 1, the ground cover shall be planted with native pollinator-friendly species. 2, all required landscaping shall be subject to the maintenance requirements and penalties prescribed in the Weed and Grass Control Plan. And 3, an 8-foot tall agricultural style fence shall be permitted in lieu of the required chain link fence as specified in the application site plan.
Thanks, Del. Ms. Hudson, is that okay to modify your motion in that way? Mr. Kirkster, your second?
I will second.
Okay, good. No. Since we have an abstention, should we have a roll call? No? No? Okay.
Voice, you can do what you want.
Okay, I'd like to do a roll call, please. Thank you. Sorry, Kelly.
Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield? Mr. Swanson? Mr. Kirkstrov?
Aye.
Ms. Hudson? Ms. Foster? Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, we got ZBA case 22-09 is another request for a special use permit, section 121.99C34 solar farm in the A1 agricultural district on a parcel generally situated in section 18 of Gaynor Township. The petitioners are Dwayne Bojart, Revocable Living Trust property owner, and Turning Point Energy TPEILKA 04 LLC applicant.
Kelly, could you load up the other PowerPoint, KA04?
Okay, can we
It's
get
got the same name as that.
yeah,
That one.
we get
so
a
it's
motion and a
KA04.
second for this one? Okay, Mr. Kirkster with the motion, second, Ms. Hudson again, okay. So we have a first and a second on the floor. We can ask questions as we go then.
This is another 5 megawatt solar farm request, special use permit. This one is located at the southeast corner of X-Line Road and Larry Power Road, Engineer Township. And we'll go ahead and let Jason go through his presentation again.
Yep, so
Yes, you are now.
Test. Okay. So this is a mimic of the presentation previously, just with some site-specific items, and so there may be some slides at the end, you know, stormwater and some of those things like that, that I'll just have skip through. It's going to be the same information I provided previously. But as Delbert mentioned, this is the site plan here, so similar, very similar layout as the previous. project, I'll highlight the same components that I did on the previous one. So we've got the site entrance along the west side there. I believe that's X-Line Road coming there. And on this one, we did actually meet early with Delbert in the process here. We had that entrance much closer to the intersection there, and he recommended that it would probably be better to move that south just to avoid some congestion and get some of that equipment further away from the intersection, which we did. We shifted it down, and on this one, you can see there is a project switchyard substation at this intersection as well right now on the southwest corner of that intersection, which is where we'll be interconnecting into along there too as well. On this one, we have a similar landscape buffer proposed on the north side. You can see some proximity to some residents there as well, so we took the same approach as I alluded to previously on this one, and same items on this site plan as the previous. Similarly, this is the transportation plan preliminary route. We'll again be coming off of Route 57 using a combination of the state highways, municipal and township roadways to get to the site during construction, and then for operations and maintenance once the facility is operational. So this is, we actually did a prototype plan. This is the one I referenced in my previous presentation for KA04. You can see the snip on the left is just some hatches of our pollinator, and the actual document that was submitted on Monday into the record has the seed mix for those two solar pollinators. We've got one species that's going to be under the arrays that's more of a low growing pollinator mix to make sure it doesn't get too high to shade the panels and limit the amount of maintenance that's there, and then a different pollinator mix that'll be along the right of way and outside the fence there, and then the buffers are similar to KA32. I went through the stormwater ground cover, so I won't highlight that again. If there's any questions, I can answer those, but these are the exact same slides and exact same approach to stormwater as the previous one. Similarly with drain tile, we've got these in here in case there's any questions. Tom is available as well if there's any questions on that, but we do have a mitigation plan in place. Decommissioning plan will be the same. The environmental overview, we did the same study. I will go through each one of these just since it's a different site and give you an overview of what was determined. It will be, a lot of the same. We submitted to the Illinois Department of Natural Resources for our EcoCat, started our SHPO consultation, and did the same level of diligence on this project that we did on the previous. Wetlands and Waterway, our team did a similar analysis, came to the same determination based on our investigations. There's no wetlands on site. We're not anticipating any impacts to any wetlands for the project. The same federally listed species came up, which is what we would anticipate being in the same, general area of the county. Again, due to the highly disturbed nature of the project and being an agricultural facility and that we're not removing any trees, we don't expect any impacts to any sort of environments that would be hosting these protected species. State protected species, again, we submitted through the EcoCat tool. DNR evaluated the site, and once again, no state listed species were identified. Thus, we don't anticipate any impacts to any state listed species for the project. Cultural resources, similarly, we submitted to the State Historic Preservation Office. We did receive a letter recommending a phase 1 archaeological survey, which again is standard in my experience for these types of projects. We'll get a phase 1 archaeological survey done by an archaeologist prior to construction so that we can get our state stormwater permit. Natural resource inventory report, we again submitted to the Soil Water Conservation District and received back the NRI in June. This one did have a LISA score of 227, which puts it at a high rating for protection. This is the one that I believe that Delbert spoke about that had 20 points for distance to sewer and water. Again, and we do believe that this is a benefit to the soil by taking this out of production and having it be a solar farm for the life here, and we also believe it's a complementary use as well. So,
all right. Like the previous one, this was heard at on Zoning Board of Appeals meeting on Monday night. Zoning Board did vote 6-0 to recommend the approval. There were no objectors present, and they did recommend the same 3 conditions that were placed on the last one.
Okay. I'm sure the questions should be the same. Larry, you have anything? You're looking at me like you had a question, sorry.
Well, just one other thing, all of my other questions have been answered satisfactorily. But I was, as far as the mechanicals, are these going to be the articulating panels? That are going to be following the sun?
Yep. Yeah. Single axis tracker. So yes, they'll follow the, in the morning, tabletop at around lunchtime, and then in the evening, and then they'll kind of reset.
Yes.
Are you going to be used? Oh, sorry. Anybody else have anything? No.
Just did a quick one.
Okay, Andy, go ahead.
What there's a stop line on the next line right there, right? Or stop sign, excuse
Stop
me.
sign. Yeah.
Not on Larry Power.
No, Larry
What
Power
are the
goes there.
setbacks to the fence line?
100 feet.
Okay. Nothing in the line of sight. Corn will be closer.
No, yes,
Yeah.
The corner will be a lot closer.
the actual substation across the street is far closer than this will be.
Right. Right.
That's why we asked them to move the entrance farther south too.
Right. Get it off the road.
Right.
Okay, because that people drive. Oh, I'm sure they drive the speed limit down that road all the time.
As all of our citizens do.
Yeah. Okay, I had a quick questions about the construction. We approved a lot of them, and they were supposed to be using H-beams, or and driven down into the ground.
Yep.
But now I see everybody's using the screw type. Are you going to be using the screw type or the driven H-beam type construction?
So I haven't seen the.
I don't have any drawings.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen the screw type. We have a structural engineering team that does those designs, and I'll say almost all the ones we do are the I-beam, your typical W-flange beams that go into ground. Yeah. My understanding is those screw types tend to be if there's bad poor soil. So if the geotech comes back and it would require a 20-foot deep I-beam, you may look at other options. So our intent economically is always to do the W-flange or the H-beams that you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, no one else has any questions? We have a motion and a second on the floor. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay. Oh, Mr. Wheeler.
Just making sure those 3 recommendations for the record were part of
We
the
read
motion.
them in at the beginning.
Well, they made the motion before. They made the motion, and then we said there's 3 stipulations. I just wanted to for the record so it doesn't
So
come back.
let's go back again and make sure that it's okay with the first and the second, that we put those same 3 things on there.
Okay.
I think maybe we should look at those, putting those in our ordinance too. So it seems to come up, same things all the time.
Well,
think
most of them
most of
are
them
in our ordinance. Actually, if you just make your your motion to agree with the recommendation of the zoning board, that would include the conditions.
Okay, I'll do that next time. I'll forget by next month. But. Okay, thank you, sir.
Good. Yeah. Thank you.
We're all
Appreciate
done.
your time.
Thanks for your time. Okay, that's it. Okay. Okay, next up we have a hazard mitigation projects we have going. Mr. Skimmerhorn has an update on that.
Yes,
for us.
Yes, we have been working very diligently on our hazard mitigation plan update. The committee has met twice already, and at our last meeting, we were given an assignment for a call for projects. We're at that point in time where it's time to start thinking about what projects would be included in the plan. So I've asked our consultant to be here today to explain how that process works and what type of projects we'd be looking for. So we're going to let her do that, but in a moment, in your packet, you do have a worksheet. Looks very similar to this, should be in your packet. Yeah. And this is what you would fill out if you have any projects for the that you would like to see in the plan. Keeping in mind that if you don't put them in the plan, you cannot get funding for those projects. But if they are in the plan, you don't necessarily have to do them. So you're not married to it, other than the fact that you need it in the plan if you want to do it at some point. We need these will need to be back to us no later than our next meeting, which is on November 3rd, but I would really like to see them sometime in October. But so I would like to make the deadline more of the PZA meeting in October. With that, we'll turn it over to Andrea from American Environmental.
Good morning, Andrea.
Good morning, everyone.
Do I have a switch for her? No. Oh, okay. Go ahead, Andrea.
Are you able to hear me okay?
Okay, we can hear you good. Everybody can hear? Okay. Go ahead.
All right. I will go ahead and pull up my slides really quick here. Okay, so as Delbert said, the county hired American to help them update their hazard mitigation plan. My name is Andrea Bostwick. I'm the Emergency Management Services Manager for American. At our August 3rd Mitigation Task Force meeting, we talked about mitigation and began discussing mitigation projects and activities. So mitigation is any sustained action that reduces the long-term risk to people and property from natural hazards. Sustained actions can be things like projects and activities. So what are we talking about with those projects and activities? Well, we're talking about things like constructing community safe rooms. That's FEMA's new word for a tornado shelter. We're talking about things like installing hardening materials at critical facilities. This can be shatter-resistant window film or glass, hail-resistant shingles, burying utility lines to critical infrastructure and facilities. An activity would be something like identifying access and functional needs populations for notification of hazard events. Activities can also include building codes and things like that, updating the existing building codes. Another type of project would be acquiring or removing flood-prone structures from the floodplain, or floodplain and stream restoration. I know one of the things that the board is interested in is that Kankakee River project, and the report that goes with that, and Delbert has forwarded that on to me. So we've kind of started to take a look at that for mitigation projects that we can also include in the plan from other planning activities that you guys have taken part in. The goal of the mitigation plan is to identify those projects and activities that will help reduce the risk to people and property in the county. So that's the heart of the plan, is that list of projects. We talk about the risks that the county has from other natural hazards, but ultimately what this plan is for is to put together that list of projects and activities. So as part of that plan update, individual project lists will be created and tailored to each of the participating jurisdictions. So FEMA prefers individual project lists now as opposed to group ones. So each of the participants, the county, and each of those municipalities, fire districts, health centers, schools, anybody who's a participating jurisdiction and wants to put projects in the plan, they will have their own separate list that they are responsible for. You're not responsible for Bourbonnais' list, and Bourbonnais is not responsible for the county's list. It's individual lists. So this list is what the county would like to see accomplished if the funds become available. It does not obligate the county to fund or complete these projects, okay? This is a wish list. This project, this plan is more of a carrot plan than a stick program. They're looking for ways to reduce those impacts because they've had so many and they've had to respond to them. They're trying to spend more money up front so that they don't have to respond on the back side. So that's what this is about. One of the things to keep in mind is that the projects and activities that are included in this plan must be mitigation related, all right, not emergency response or maintenance. Now, there's a gray area between emergency response and recovery and mitigation, and we can talk about those areas, but ultimately this is a mitigation plan. So the projects that are not considered mitigation are things like radio and video equipment for police and fire, the sheriff's department, dump trucks and Humvees, sidewalk repair, construction of helipads, things like that are considered response, not mitigation. So we're looking at projects that we want to include that are mitigation related. Now, if you do have a project and you're not sure where it falls on that spectrum, please include it, because then we can have that discussion, because if you don't include it, I can't tell you yes or no, all right? So if it's a project you would like to see included, please put it in, and then we can have that discussion of where it falls on that spectrum of mitigation, emergency management, okay? So I know Delbert talked about that form. I think there was also a list of projects that we've seen put in for other counties, and there's other handouts that we can provide, but that gives you real life examples of other mitigation projects that counties have put in other areas of Illinois. That gives you some examples to look at. All we're looking at right now is that project description. Don't worry about any of the other columns. We're just after that project description, because sometimes it's easier to see what others have put in, and then they kind of get you thinking about what you need as a county. And there's also no point in recreating the wheel if you don't have to. So if you need these electronically, just let us know and we can get those to you. One of the things Delbert talked about was that form, this form. We'd like to use it to identify any potential mitigation projects that the county would like to include in the plan. So on this form are 3 pieces of information that we are going to need. One of those is a project description. So I don't need a paragraph, but I do need more than 2 words, all right? So if one of the projects that we get a lot of is generators, if there's a generator for one of the critical facilities within the county, the courthouse, highway, public health, any of those are interested in a project like that, I need to know whether they're talking about permanent or portable and what type of facility it will be at, all right? You don't have to be fancy with your words. That's my job. When we get all of those project lists back, I'll make them pretty for FEMA. But what I really need is just what you think of as a project. The other thing that I need is the individual or department that will be responsible for administrating that project. Is it going to be the county board? Is it going to be the highway engineer? Is it going to be the public health administrator? Is it going to be Delbert and the planning department? Those are the kind of things that FEMA wants to know that you've thought about, is who's going to be responsible for that grant if you get it to do that project, okay? And then that third piece of information I need is an estimated time frame. Now, this doesn't have to be down to the day, week, and month. It's more of a general time frame. Are we talking you want to see it done in a year? You'd like to see it done and you're not quite sure, so that 2 to 5 year range would be good. You can use ranges, you can use specific time frames. We do not like to use time frames less than a year, because what we found is that applying for grants and getting through that process takes you at least a year to get the project, generally, unless all of the stars align and you hit the end of a grant cycle, get in, and they pick it within 6 months. So generally we say a year on those, unless it's a project that you already know you're going to do, but you want to put in just because in case funding falls through. And when you put projects in, these need to be projects that have not begun yet. So they're shovel ready, but you haven't started them, because once you've started them, you can't go back and apply for funding for them. So these are projects that you would like to see done in the future that you haven't quite gotten to yet, okay? Like Delbert said, if possible, I know he would like these back at the next PZA meeting or the next couple PZA meetings. Our next meeting of the mitigation task force is November 3rd. So we would really like them back by then, understanding that the list that we get back at that point are just draft, and that projects can be added through the end of the process. And past the November meeting is the 3rd meeting. We'll have a 4th meeting where we will have all of those lists together. We'll put everything out there for review, and then we'll have a public forum following that. So anytime during that time frame, if somebody comes up with another project that they're thinking about that wasn't included on this list, we can certainly add it. But right now, what we're looking for are those draft lists so that we can start putting everything together and asking questions. Does anybody have any questions of what we're after?
Okay. Janice? When you talk about shovel ready, I can't see you. Oh, there you go. Are you there, Andrea?
Here, hold on, I'll stop sharing.
Okay, there you go. See, it's hard to talk to somebody that's not there.
I understand.
When you talk about shovel ready, does that mean we have to have all the engineering and all the process done and the bids out and everything ready to go? Or shovel ready means, to me, you got to ready for a permit. Is that what that means? We have to pay all the engineering and all the fees up front to get a project on the list?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay, well, that's kind of the way it sounded. I don't know.
They can be along that scale. They can be, you've thought about the project and you haven't gotten to those engineering studies. These can be plans. If this is something that's a project that's going to be done in phases or steps, where you need to figure out first what the actual problem is. This is especially true for drainage and flood problems.
Okay.
We see a lot of people put in a planning activity to figure out exactly what they need before we put in a project that says, this is what we're after.
Okay.
But we also have people who have projects that are sitting there that are ready to go, but they haven't found a funding source for them. So we encourage you to put in both types of projects and plans.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have anything? Andrea came here to answer questions. Nobody has any? Okay, Mr. Wheeler.
Multi-jurisdictional, what about by-state plans? And I speak specifically about the Kankakee and Yellow River 40-year work plan that does have an extension going into Kankakee County and also Iroquois, but it's mainly for the Iroquois River that is in Kankakee County. We have identified things. Does it carry extra weight if we do a multi-state you know, I want to say, ask, if you will, or plans, put the whole thing in there? Do people look at that like you've got 2 states that are together on this? Do we have the states submit them, or do we have the counties that are along the river submit them, or all of the above? I mean, how do we handle this?
I think for that one, it does hold more weight if you've got more than one jurisdiction looking at that project or that plan study. That was the one that Delbert forwarded to me. I've kind of taken a quick look at it. Because that portion is in Kankakee and it's probably going to be your jurisdiction to take care of, it needs to go in under you, but it's one of those that you can look at and say, hey, we did a regional plan on this, and that holds more weight. When you've looked at it regionally, you can say, this is the recommendations that will work best for everyone as it flows through. The state plan is not necessarily geared for that. They're looking for you to do it at the local level.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
thanks, Andy. Anything else, Andy? That's it? Okay, anyone else have any questions? Okay, barring any, no more questions, Dahl, you have any questions?
No, I think that's it. Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, oh, Mr. Wheeler again? Oh, sure.
Is this competitive money, or is it need-based? Like, I guess what I'll say it in this frame. We need a generator at the courthouse, but in order to do that, we got to spend $250,000 to change all the switch gears and everything in the courthouse. That's a major project that I don't know that we could afford, if not for, you know, this getting it funded by the federal government. But is that $250 in competition with everybody else? Like, they appropriate, you know? I'm just trying to figure out what chance do we have to actually get that kind of money out of this effort.
And that's a very fair question. It depends upon what grant program it goes through. So FEMA's grant programs, if it goes FEMA, there has what's called the Hazard Mitigation Assistance Program. That is an umbrella that covers right now 3 grant programs. It covers BRIC, which is Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, Flood Mitigation Assistance, FMA, and then HMGP, which is the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. Hazard Mitigation Grant Program is awarded after a federal disaster declaration is declared for the state. All right, so with the HMGP program, it's probably a little more right now of an interesting program than the other 2, because who you're competing against is those in Illinois. All right, both BRIC and FMA are federally competitive programs. So while they're interesting to put in on, they need to be larger projects for BRIC. And right now, Illinois is at a disadvantage in terms of the scoring model that is being used at the federal level. One of the things about BRIC is that there are points awarded for the applicant, which is actually the state, if they have building codes available. Illinois, along with most of the Midwest, do not have building codes at the state level. So Illinois is already behind on points for any projects they put in because they do not get those points. So you start in the hole when you're talking about a federally competitive grant program across the United States. BRIC is just finished its 2nd year. The projects that were awarded across the United States were mainly on the coasts for BRIC. East Coast, West Coast, Texas got a couple. The middle of the United States didn't get very much. There were a couple projects. There was one in Wisconsin, one in Kentucky. Most of those are $1 million+ projects that go through BRIC. Now, the thing about BRIC is each of the states is awarded an amount of money through BRIC that's not competitive nationally. It's money that the state can use for planning and other efforts. There is some talk about using some of that money for smaller projects that wouldn't necessarily be competitive through BRIC. I'm not sure quite where they're at with that, but that's one of the other things for BRIC is there is some small amount of state money that they can use for projects that fall under $500,000 that are in the $250,000 to $100,000 range. BRIC is a yearly program. It is generally done for grant applications in the fall. The NOFO for this next grant cycle is supposed to come out in the next week or 2 for BRIC. and we'll see if they've changed any of their criteria. They modified them slightly between the first year and the second year. I don't know what the second year and the third year is going to bring yet. If that answers your question, there are grant programs available, but the more interesting ones for me, for my counties, is the HMGP, those federal disaster declaration money programs.
Easier to get. Okay. Thank you, Andrea. If we barring no more questions for you, I guess we'll have to let you go, as I'm sure you have some other things to do. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Just on a side note, the HMGP is what we use to tear down the house on River Lane. That's the grant we got for that.
Mr. Chairman, I just wondered where spillways and retention fits into this whole thing, land acquisition for spillways, because we need a place for the water to go so it doesn't flood like Aroma Park.
FEMA project.
Exactly. You see that, I don't know where that fits into this whole thing.
That's likely one of those larger projects, so it'd probably fit under BRIC, but then again, getting the money into the Midwest from the BRIC program.
Yeah.
BRIC is really in its infancy, so I'm pretty sure that the rules are going to change over time. It's on its second year right now since it started.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, anyone else? Okay. Okay, that's all. I guess we'll move on here. Okay, Dell's going to give us an update on document scanning retention today.
Yeah, if you recall, a few months ago, we talked about scanning all of our filing cabinets and making those digital. We put that little project on hold for a while we learned about what we need to do to retain our documents. It turns out that while we can scan them for our own use, many of our documents do have varying degrees of how long we need to retain them, such as our building permit files we have to keep for 5 years. Zoning files have to be kept forever. And scanning, according to the state, is not a viable way to keep them because there's no guarantee that they can be kept forever. So we do need to keep the hard copies of those for those specified periods of time. Just want to give you an update. We're planning to go forward with the scanning project so that we can make our files more readily accessible and usable. But there is going to be, at least with the building permit files, there will be a 5-year period where we will still have to keep them. We don't have to keep them in the filing cabinets and readily available. They can be in boxes and stored somewhere, but we will be keeping them. So, and of course the zoning files will be kept forever.
Anyone have any questions on that project? We've talked about it before. Barring none, I guess we'll move on, Del, to the new positions. Let's have you talk about the solid waste coordinator position.
Well, yes, Kankakee County has a solid waste plan, albeit it's outdated a little bit. It's still a plan in place. We have a solid waste ordinance, and there are solid waste activities going on throughout the county. However, we have not had a position in my office to do the work involved with those things since about 2008. We lost our solid waste coordinator around 2008, and that position was never replaced. So all of those activities all went to the wayside. I brought this situation up to Chairman Wheeler probably about a month ago, and he agreed that if we have an ordinance in place and we have a plan, we should be enforcing that ordinance and we should be following that plan, and wanted me to bring it before this committee to get your feelings on establishing that position and refilling that position. I'm looking at it from a 3 points of duties. 1 would be enforcement of our ordinances. 2 would be program management, such as our e-waste program, which is now being handled between me and Ben, and we'll get to that in a little bit on our next subject. Doing things like keeping our plan up to date, suggesting ordinance changes, doing other activities such as tire recycling, household hazardous waste events, those sort of things. So that would be program management. And thirdly, education. Creating brochures, Facebook posts, going to the public and talking to them about the best practices for dealing with solid waste. We get a fair number of calls in our office I've got paint cans, what do I do with them? Okay, and various other things like that. And right now, our staff is handling them the best we can. So I wanted to bring this out here and basically ask what the committee or the boards would think about that.
Well, Andy's Mr. Wheeler is the guy we need to talk to on
Well,
funds. You know.
you're, that's why it's front of committee. It's really a board decision. These positions existed in the past, okay? They,
In 08, it was.
I think it was,
It's around 08, I
yeah,
think.
08.
It's when you cut everybody
We
off
lost
that
a lot
wasn't
of people
doing
in
it.
planning back
Yeah.
then, yeah, for obvious reasons. But, you know, the questions I had for Del when he brought it to me was, you know, does this person work with the Illinois EPA? Do we do the inspections, like for, you know, all of that stuff? And he said, yes, with a delegation agreement, we would take that over from the Illinois IEPA. And that's a good thing, you know. And I said, you know, what, is there any revenue attached? And he said, probably not. There's grants available for that kind of stuff, and we would investigate those. But, and then I also said, well, what about these complaints we get about, you know, buried stuff that's out in the Pembroke Township, Hopkins Park areas? Could this person investigate that stuff to the best of their abilities? And if there's, you know, move it forward if things are found. And that is a responsibility as a you know, code enforcement. It's a code issue, you know. So it's all those different activities. You know, the garbage ends up in the ditches, you know, working with the townships, all that kind of stuff. We all hear about it, we all know about it, but we've never had people to actually uphold those ordinances. Now that we have, I would say, surplus in revenues, a vast surplus of revenues out of the planning department, more than they spend. This, I said, well, let's bring it to the committee then and ask them if you think it's time.
Yeah. So, okay, anybody else, anybody have any questions? I had a couple we could talk about later, I guess. Is that be boots in a car or a desk in an office type position, or both?
I think it's both, depending on which of those three activities they're doing any particular day.
Okay. Is it hard to find people today that want to do both, or are they out there?
I think this type of job, and from what I've been able to research at other locations, that's the typical description for this job. So finding someone willing to do that is probably not difficult. Finding a person these days can be difficult, but finding somebody who's experienced or has the ability to do that or the want to do that is probably not that difficult.
Okay. So we'd be looking for somebody that could do both. Office, work in the office, get along with people, and then could go out in his Tahoe and drive across the farm field and get all muddy.
We would be looking for a professional, yes.
And walk around in the mud in his boots and see what's going on with a shovel. Okay, multifaceted position.
Yes.
Is that something we have to advertise for, or you have a place to look for? We have I haven't read it in quite a long time, Andy, the solid waste thing. If I remember right, it's real lot there, right?
It's large. It needs updating. I think the state requirement to update it on a schedule has expired. So we don't have a state requirement. We still should do it. We should be measuring how much recycling is going through the county and other things associated with that. And frankly, in order to receive some of those grants, we have to measure that.
You have to have a charter or something, what you're doing with your stuff.
And that goes through Regional Planning Commission as well. That this person would probably work, I imagine, with them on any things that would involve Regional Planning Commission as well.
They would be reporting to them. Just like all the rest of the divisions, they would have a seat at the table and report what they're doing. Yes.
Would that help out with the building department any with complaints of going out looking at? Is there a lot of complaints you get about solid waste, like washers and dryers laying in the fields and stuff?
We do get fly dumping, that type of stuff. Occasionally we get calls about other things such as buried tanks. Okay. People dig up a foundation and find barrels. There are some.
So right now, if somebody called in and they go, "Oh, we got a problem over here. What do? We really don't have anybody."
We would direct them to the IEPA at this point.
Okay. Okay, that's something we should talk about as we go, or
it's here for an approval.
For an approval. Yeah. Okay. I'd like, if we had a motion to start advertising for the position and set the salary and all that type would be set at the county board level, or
I have developed
Be
a,
finance, would it be your budget from Dell? Or Ben? Okay.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, this is really something you would start now to be included in next year's budget.
Okay.
If you did hire somebody before then there's definitely enough revenues to cover that position before, but it was more like, if Dell wants to do it and we agree, now's the time to start looking for that person, because it's not easy to find people for anything, let alone something that has a skill set and a certification and things like that.
I have developed a job description, which is up in Human Resources right now being reviewed. If I were to start the hiring process next week, it would probably be next budget season by the time I actually hired somebody anyway, so next budget season would probably be appropriate.
Okay.
For our December 1st budget.
Well, I guess that's technically spending money eventually. To look into it, I don't know, is that?
You can get a roll call.
Okay,
It's up to you,
okay,
Mr. Chairman.
okay. I entertain a motion to have Dell start looking and maybe searching, okay, for what he need. Well, okay, give Mr. Kirkster and second by Ms. Peters. We get a roll call, please, Kelly? Sorry.
So that is to create the position?
To create the position and
Start the search.
start the search, get the process rolling. So
Thank you.
we have an ordinance, we got to be able to take care of it. So,
Mr. Featherly?
aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Peters?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield? Mr. Swanson? Mr. Kirkstra?
Aye.
Ms. Hudson? Ms. Foster? Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. There you go, Dell.
All right.
More work for you.
Well, hopefully it will help with some of the work.
Yeah.
Which leads us into the next item, which is an assistant planner, transportation planner position in my office. We currently have an open transportation planner slot, which we've been having a lot of difficulty filling. And I got to think that the problem with the transportation planner position, while there's need there, that position is funded by our transportation grant, and that person can only work for the transportation grant, and does not really help me or Ben or the rest of my staff with all of the other planning activities that we have going on within the office. And believe me, there are a lot of them, such as the Accelerate Broadband program, some of the other, the Kankakee River grant programs, the appropriations there. So talking with Ben and then with Chairman Wheeler, we thought about what if the grant only paid for 50% of that person's salary, and we had an assistant planner position also attached to that. So 50% of the time they could be utilized for zoning cases and these various other planning activities that we have. I have not seen Ben's to-do list lately, but my list is 4 pages long right now.
Okay.
We have a lot of activities going on, and with the amount of grants and new programs coming out of the federal and state government, I don't see that getting less anytime soon. So I'm asking that we create an assistant planner / transportation planner position.
Okay. I have a couple quick ones, Dell. Is that somebody that you would be responsible for, or Ben would be responsible for, or you 2 days a week here, 2 days a week
Well,
there,
I would-
as needed?
I would be responsible for them as the department head,
Okay,
as
as
I
your
am with all of
department
my
head.
employees.
Okay.
However, I would, Ben would be giving them the transportation part of the work, and most likely some of the other planning activities as well.
So this would this be a most needed day, what they do that day, or whoever needs it the most? Is that how you would divvy the work up?
We would work through that on a day-to-day basis. Once they got started rolling, there would be regular activities that they would be responsible
Okay, and then trying to find an assistant planner, transportation planner is kind of a hard thing to look for today.
Probably no harder than any other position, but
Okay.
it's possible.
Okay.
We have had difficulty. Well, actually, the one we had advertised was a transportation manager's position that we decided that we'd be better off and probably easier to get would be a transportation planner.
Okay. And Andy, would that be something like the benefits by this guy and a salary by that guy type department thing? Is that how that would work?
No, it's all within the same department.
all within the
They're,
same.
yeah, they're not doing work for other people. They're doing it for
Okay,
us.
just
It's
same floor, same
So
side.
the grant would pay for the transportation planner portion of it, including all benefits.
Okay.
The assistant planner portion would have to come out of general fund or grants or other.
Mr. Wilson, you walked up to the mic.
Chairman. Just for the edification of the committee, this position would be no different than a lot of our current staff within the planning department. Many of the people that work within the planning department have a portion of their time if they commit a few hours. Mary does copies for us or whatever for we apply that to the grant, and we do that on a biweekly payroll basis. So we send up to the finance department X number % of their time this pay period was committed to. So this person would be the same thing as they were working on transportation related activities. They would have their timesheet reflecting that, and we would just bill that directly to the grant, and then the remainder of those funds would come out of the other side of the general fund.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions for Del? I really think that with the amount of solar farms, the amount of building and wind farms and all the things we have coming for the planning office there, I can't see how we're going to probably get it done without some help of some kind. And Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you. And I'll speak to that. This is one that I absolutely 100. If there was more % than 100, I would say it. But 100% behind this, because I know we're ripping Ben in 1,000 different directions, and this is to. He is the gentleman here that handles a lot of our grants and these appropriation documentations and things like that are dealing with the DCO and all the transportation stuff. And this is all interconnected. So he can't manage e-waste. He can't manage all of these other different things because we need him for the next year where all this is ground zero. Yeah. We're talking Armor Road project. We're talking, whether it's Career Center or, 9,000 Road. I mean, there is so much that's on his plate. He's going to be burned here in about 6 months, and we don't want to do that.
Okay.
And plus now we finally have a little bit of wiggle room to be able to get back into planning. Everybody has a unique skill set. He's able to connect all these state departments to the appropriations and the grants and be able to do the paperwork and, I don't know, be the whisperer, if you will, to try to raise the dead in the state to get them to respond to something. That's probably the best way to put it, because you think we have it bad, they're turning people over every couple of months, and so we have new grant managers all the time. So this is absolutely needed in that department for the betterment of all these different things that we're going. It's just not to create a position. We've got all this momentum. Now, how do we actually execute on all this? Yeah. That's where we're at.
And I really think we need Mr. Wilson to concentrate on the grants and the funding and the big projects instead of all the office type stuff and things going on, smaller things too. Right. So that would help him out considerably and give him some more time. Del, you have any comments on that?
So yes, I think we need to use Ben's skill set to the highest and best possible use, and a lot of the general planning work that our office doesn't need to be Ben doing it.
Yeah. So it'd be nice to be ahead of the game on a lot of these projects instead of reacting to them as they come in. We got to be ready for them before they get here. Then.
That being said, we do need somebody to do them. So
yes. Okay. Well, we need a motion and a second. Did we do that already? No? Okay. We need a motion and a second. Okay. Mr. Fairfield and Larry Kirkstra, second. We get all spending money again. Let's do a roll call.
Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Miller? Aye. Ms. Peters? Aye. Mr. Fairfield? Aye. Mr. Swanson? Aye. Mr. Kirkstra? Aye. Ms. Hudson? Aye. Ms. Foster? Aye. Mr. Wheeler? Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. You're really starting to see a difference in the planning department getting back to where it's not behind and things get back in shape and we don't have to be panicking when something comes in we're not ready for. So be nice to be ready. Okay, and next up is old business. We have anything under old business for anybody? And then we're going to skip right to new business. We have anybody for new business at all? Okay, Mr. Wheeler?
I have a question. It's on the agenda, so we talked about it. We have a lot of people we haven't seen on that regional planning commission in 1, 2, 3, 4 years.
That's last month.
And so the resolutions all say or until a replacement is found. would it be appropriate for someone to make the motion that we adjust the regional planning? And by the way, let me back up. We have problems with quorum because we have, what, 18 people on it? And if
You gotta have 9.
you gotta have 10 people show up, and
Actually 17 people, I think.
it's 17, but you see the difficulty.
Still need
we have.
9.
Could we maybe trim that back? Huh? A third's a quorum with regional? Oh, by their bylaws, but still, there's problems with that. Can we trim back to the people that we've seen in the last year or 2 years maybe, and then have that be the number?
Okay,
You see where I'm talking about? We gotta do something, because
Yeah.
we can't fill these.
We can't keep asking for 6 people all the time either. We happen to have the chairman of that committee sitting right here, okay? What do you think about that, Chad?
I'd be fine with that. Yeah, it is a challenge sometimes to get a quorum.
Okay, what's your number that you think we should be at instead of 17, though?
We're at 17 currently is the number of.
Yeah, how many active would you say you have active? Like they come in and see you or call you back or return your calls and your emails when you send them to them?
Maybe 9 or 10,
10?
somewhere there.
ZBA is 7, right, though?
6, I guess 7,
6.
excuse me, 7.
Mantino has 6, plus the chairman would be 7 on their planning and zoning there. Andy, what about when you went to Bourbonnais? How many did they have on planning? Was there
7?
that's
Roughly
what I thought.
7, yeah.
7 is typical in the municipalities, but keeping in mind though that in the municipalities, the planning commission is generally the zoning board of appeals as well.
Yeah, but it wasn't in Mantino until just recently.
So that is, the membership for those is required and set by state statute if it's a zoning board of appeals as well.
It's really like, what do you want us to do? You know,
Well-
because we're just, it's been a year, we've had 6 openings now.
Yeah, we had Colton asked Colton was the one that asked to be appointed there. Did we
Yeah.
appoint him at last county board meeting, or did we?
Yes.
We did that? Okay, so does that give you, Mr. Fairfield?
I was just curious why the 17 is the number of.
It seems like a lot, but it's a big area.
Reason for that?
We have a big area in the county, so they want to get somebody from a little bit from everybody, I believe.
When it was developed, exactly why they chose 17 and not a different number, I can't really say, but the idea of the Regional Planning Commission is to get a good cross-section of people from the county. Different walks of life, different incomes, different educational backgrounds, different races, just different. So you get different opinions, different viewpoints, and that is all great. So the more the merrier, really, but if you don't get participation, and it keeps us from getting business done because we can't get a quorum, then we need to think about tailoring it back.
So, in being the size of the county is 110,000 people, that maybe 10 or 12 or somewhere for represents your per 100,000.
Yeah, I would not want a even number, so I would think somewhere around 11 would be a good
if we went to 11, then who has to notify the guys that we're not going to have come back?
I would say if the tenor of this group is that, yes, we want to look at that, let us talk to the state's attorney to figure out what language needs to be in a resolution to basically say, if your term is up, basically, could we have to do something to fix all those resolutions that say until a successor is appointed?
Yeah.
Because we're never going to have a successor appointed if we keep going the same direction we are.
Yeah.
We've tried all the outreach. We've tried putting it on Facebook all over the place. The board members can talk to people in their area about being on it. It's been a year since we still had 6 sitting there.
Yeah.
So don't have to take action today, but just tell me what you want me to do. And I'll do it.
Well, we talked about it last meeting. I got, I think, 2, maybe 3 phone calls about it, about the fact that we have a committee and we don't have to have so many people to have a meeting, and it seems like they never have meetings about anything, and we have a comprehensive plan that's like outdated and all that stuff, and having meetings, it's going to become more involved, and Mr. Miller tries to put together a meeting. You got to spend a couple hours on the phone try to get everybody there, right, Chad? Or is that how it is?
I usually allow planning department staff to do that outreach, but there is a significant amount of back and forth trying to get people there.
How about responses on phone calls? You have any problem getting anybody to call you back or anything? Because some people were asking me, are these people just say they want to be on there and they never go to any meetings? Is that why they would be on there? I mean, I mean, so I could say I'm on the Regional Planning Commission and never go to a meeting.
I
guess.
have, there's a PowerPoint that has the chart on it from last meeting, if you wanted to bring it up, about
Yeah, can we
membership,
take-
it's up to you.
I'd like to take a couple
Decide if you
minutes
want
and
to
move.
publicly out people, but
mean,
that's,
yeah,
you
I don't
I don't
know.
know that that does any good, but.
We're not really asking for action today, just
Okay.
tell us that's the direction you'd like us to go, and
We'll investigate how to do
investigate
it.
all of
I'd like
that.
to see Dell try to create a number and, you know, work with Chad on a number that you guys, 12, 14, 16, you know, whatever you guys think it needs to be. And then we'll talk about it, you know, before the next PZA meeting, so we can move on it then. Would that be soon enough, Andy? Next
Fine
month?
with me, yeah, it's been
Okay.
going on a while, so.
Yeah, so this is the third time we've talked about it, so I'd like to see us get a move on this planning commission thing. Is that possible? Okay, so let's plan on next meeting. We'll have the amount and then we'll be ready to move on this at the next meeting in September.
Thank you.
Okay, that was new business. We have a, okay, Mr. Kirkster.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I move that we adjourn.
second by Ms. Peters. All in favor, say aye.